welcome aboard.
Please welcome to the stage, it's me, Axios host and editor, Naila Boodoo. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, for joining us in beautiful Long Beach this morning. Please take a seat if you haven't already. My name is Naila Boodoo, and I'm an Axios host and editor, and I'm excited to kick off our great conversation this morning about decarbonization in Southern California. And thank you, all of you who came from different parts of SoCal, for coming in today. For those of you who are tuning in online, please be sure to use the hashtag Axios events. And let's get started. I'd like to welcome our first guest, the Chief Sustainability Officer for LA County, Rita Campolat. Hi, Rita. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get straight into it and just talk about decarbonization. And when we talk about the state's 2030 targets for that, what are your priorities for LA County when it comes to the current decarbonization policies that you all have been developing and implementing?
Yeah, we have a lot of priorities for sure. And we've kind of done the work of looking at our climate action plan and developing that for the county. So we kind of know what some of our largest sectors are in terms of contribution. So one of the things, for instance, that we're looking at is building decarbonization and starting to develop a policy around that.
So when you say building decarbonization, can you tell us a little bit more of what that looks like?
Yeah, for sure. So our building sector accounts for, I think, roughly a quarter, if not more, of the GHG greenhouse gas emissions in the region. And that's because of natural gas usage. It also very much depends on where electricity is sourced, because obviously we know that some of our electricity still is generated by fossil fuels. So what we're looking at is how do we move those buildings to lower their greenhouse gas emissions, whether that's through switching to electric appliances where possible, but it can also be energy efficiency, reducing overall energy use.
Right, and when we think about that, like I'm just even thinking about a building like this, and I always am surprised when I come to California, like how old it is, right? I'm from Florida, so this is why I always say this. But like when you think about adaptation, and that was what I wanted to ask you about, like when we're talking about climate resiliency, oftentimes we talk about mitigation versus adaptation. Can we just stick first with the building resiliency and adaptation, and when we're thinking particularly about older buildings, what that looks like?
Yeah, so I mean, there's still a lot of work that we can do with older buildings to increase energy efficiency. It gets a little bit boring maybe, but it can be things like replacing windows or better insulation, even just how a building is operated to make sure that we're really, minimizing the amount of energy that we're using when a building is not in use. It can be as simple as things like turning off the lights and like adjusting temperatures, and that can have a big impact. But then you get into larger, efforts like actually replacing appliances and moving from something that may be natural gas powered to something that's electric.
So what is the sort, as CSO for the county, when you're talking to buildings and tenants and corporations, what is your message about the incentive for this? Especially as I don't know how much of it is energy prices versus being good corporate citizens. Like, how are you messaging that?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're still working on that, and I think the policy is complex, right? So it's not just going to be about like bringing down a hammer and telling people that they can no longer do X, Y, Z. They need to switch out all their appliances. It's really going to be a combination of, first of all, phasing things in with very large buildings, looking at other regulations that are coming down the pike and making sure that we're aligning them. So when people have to replace an appliance already, maybe they switch to electric at that time. It's also about offering incentives and things like that. And then again, as you mentioned, like when you were talking about energy efficiency retrofits, that is something that should result in cost savings as well.
Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about mitigation versus adaptation, what is the strategy for you all?
Yeah, well, so just definitions. Mitigation is really about reducing GHG emissions overall, right? So that's just how we kind of try to lessen the impacts of climate by just reducing what we're emitting. Adaptation is really about, understanding that there are going to be impacts. We're already seeing them around us, and how do we shift our behavior or other things in order to be able to kind of cope and better manage that.
And so one of the things I wanted to ask you about is LA County was just the largest recipient of EPA's climate pollution reduction program. A lot of that actually has to do with right here, the port and Long Beach. Can you tell us a little bit about that $500 million and what that specifically is going to be going into here?
Yeah, we were so thrilled to get that award. I think we've done a lot of work in this region to kind of prepare ourselves for kind of figuring out what we need to do, going out and talking to communities and leaders and kind of developing a strategy as a region. Through all of that work, goods movement has been identified as a really high priority for us to tackle. Not only because, it is a large source of emissions, like the ports are the biggest port complex in the country. So, when we think about what's happening in the ports of LA and Long Beach, that really has like national impacts, right, in terms of the overall emissions. And so it's not only that, but it's also one of the largest sources of air quality issues for our communities. We have a lot of lower income communities that are around the ports and around our freight corridors, like the 710, that are really heavily impacted. In addition, that sector can be really hard to decarbonize, right? We're talking about big, heavy-duty trucks. So that was why that was a really big priority when that money became available through the federal government, through the IRA, for us to really design a project around that. So things that it's going to address are, again, those chargers that are hard and expensive to put in place, those medium and heavy-duty trucks. Also, education and workforce development to make sure that communities are able to tap into some of those transition and changes that we're trying to make.
When you go to education and workforce, can we stop with that for a minute here? First of all, just in terms of education and community messaging, oftentimes, particularly communities that have been the victims of all of this are the most skeptical of government programs. Like, what is your messaging to these communities about what LA County is trying to do in terms of air pollution?
Yeah, that really can be the case. I think that we're really trying to shift our approach over the past few years in terms of how we engage communities and making sure that things aren't so top down, but we're really engaging them in the process from the beginning. So that's time consuming, but it is really worthwhile in the long run to just have conversations with communities along the way and making sure that we're being transparent about what we're doing. I think we're lucky in LA that we have a very active advocacy base that kind of helps us connect and actually has deep connections with the community as well. And so we also try to engage them as partners in the work that we're doing.
When it comes to workforce development and we think about the green economy, what is the biggest challenge you see in terms of the workforce that we have, and if they have the skills needed to do all of the things that we've been talking about?
Yeah, we have a very diverse workforce and economy in LA, but there's a lot of work to do. So it is about training people for those industries of the future and things like EV chargers, and we're going to need people to install them, but also to be able to, do all that maintenance that we're hearing about with those chargers that go down, which is like software skills as well. So it's that, but it's also, again, making sure that we are plugging in communities that maybe haven't been part of those workforce and those industries historically, right? So it's not just making sure that the workforce is there, it's who has access to those jobs.
Mm-hmm. You're a chemical engineer by training yourself. How does that mindset translate to the work that you're doing now?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, so I have very much an engineering background, and I think as I was getting into my career, again, a very technical side of things, I would always see how policy really influenced everything that we did. And I think at some point, I wanted to be more on the side of figuring out what we were doing and how we were doing versus just implementing policy. So I think, an engineering background is helpful because there are a lot of aspects of our job and our policy that are very technical. And we also work with a very diverse group of stakeholders through agencies, the folks that are operating or implementing projects. And it's nice to be able to talk to people and understand where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the Clean Power Alliance, which has been a partner for you all in renewables. Can you give us a sense of how that work, how much it matters in terms of the goals that we're talking about when it comes to decarbonization?
Yeah, so the Clean Power Alliance, for those who are not familiar with it, is a utility that was formed in the LA region. It is what's called a community choice aggregation entity. And so that's something that's allowable in California. Basically, what they do is they're able to source power. Again, kind of the goal is really to move things towards more renewable energy. So our local entity is the Clean Power Alliance. They've been a huge partner in helping us reach our goals at the county for renewable energy. So, for instance, we were lucky enough that they offer, several tiers of green energy. In 2022, we were able to move all of our county facilities that are CPA customers to 100% renewable energy. And that is also now a default choice that is available to all the customers in the CPA territory, which I think there are like 35 jurisdictions that in like the LA Ventura region that are customers.
Mm-hmm. And when you think about the grid in particular, what can you give us sort of a sense of renewables, the role they're playing in the grid, and what you would like to see by 2030? Like, what is your goal?
Yeah, for sure. So, by 2030 and 2050, we are slowly trying to move to fully carbon neutral state. So we're
6 years from now.
I know. Yes. Well, we have midway goals in 2030, but again, like I was saying, the nice thing about a place like CPA, once we've kind of stated those goals as the county and big jurisdictions, people are moving to kind of meet those. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, especially in the grid. We understand that even with the demands that we currently have, our grid is not always up to the task. But again, I think the nice thing about having the state and local jurisdictions put forward those goals is it's giving us all something to work towards.
One thing I'm curious about is, we are here in Long Beach. We're talking about you talked about working regionally. How hard is that, do you feel like, from a county perspective, to engage with all of these perhaps different other municipalities on this?
Yeah, we have 88 cities in the county. Yeah, it is a challenge. It is something that I think is really necessary because, for those of us who didn't come from Long Beach today, you're probably just driving through a continuous stream of cities. So it's not like we have, undeveloped areas or suburbs around our cities. It's really like a big continuous urban region. So it is challenging, but it tends to be for us like kind of issue specific. So our cities are very diverse. They have very different interests. And what we found to work is kind of identifying topics that are of interest to cohorts of cities and bringing them together.
Rita, you all are revising your current strategy when it comes to all of this. I think it's interesting to think about, I think for so long we were just talking about having strategies in place. Yeah. Now we're talking about revising them. What is, to your mind, the most important things and how you're adapting policies now to what the strategic needs are for the county? Yeah,
so you're talking about our county plan. That's our sustainability plan, which really presents our big overall vision for what sustainability is in the county. And it's kind of hard for me to believe, but it has been 5 years since we first released that plan. Personally, I'm really focused on implementation and moving forward. We've got a lot of things that are in the works in those past 5 years, like the decarbonization policy. We just put out a draft community forest management plan. So there's a lot of work that's been done to that was kind of launched out of that plan. So when we think about the revision, a lot of my vision for it is not about, planning for the sake of planning or just putting out some nice splashy document, but it's really about being targeted in how we look at it. So, we'll do things like take out actions that we've accomplished, see where things may have changed, our thinking has changed, see where we can kind of push our goals farther and be a little bit more ambitious as well.
You've talked a lot about the things that happen in LA, how much of national significance they have. I'm thinking about conversations that we are going to be having at Axios House next week in New York for Climate Week. In particular, I'm going to be talking to the White House National Climate Advisor, Ali Zaidi. What would you say to him, to the Biden administration, about what LA County needs as we think about these conversations that are going to be happening next week around not just domestic but international climate policy?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I would say a couple of things. First of all, we talked about the climate pollution reduction grant. Again, I can't tell you how exciting it was to see a source of funding
from the IRA.
Significant source of funding that could be used to implement some of these big ambitious goals that we've been putting into place because, as you mentioned, we have a lot of big plans and big goals. A lot of it now is like, how do we actually do them with the resources? So one thing I would say is, thank you. Hopefully that is a program that can continue and we can build on. I would also say, people sometimes look at LA and see us having resources. We're a big city. We've got a lot of great things going for us. And so sometimes I think there's an attitude of LA doesn't need help. We can kind of do things ourselves. We're moving things ourselves. But I would also say look to us as a model and a partner to be really ambitious and to meet some of the goals that we want to, and hopefully be a beacon and a model for the rest of the world, because I think we have a lot going for us. We have the plans, we have the leadership. If we have the resources and the support to make them happen, I think we're ready to do that.
Well, fortunately, we are out of time, but thank you. That was a really good place to end. Rita Kampala, LA County Chief Sustainability Officer. Thank you, Rita. Thank you. Introducing our View from the Top moderator and General Manager of Global, National, and Local Events, John Otto.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Really happy to be here in Long Beach. I'm John Otto, GM of Axios Live. So a bit about today's event. It's not possible without the support of our partners. Shell has been a terrific sponsor and partner for us. This is the culmination of a year-long series that we've done. It's taken us to Richmond, Virginia. We've been in Baton Rouge. We're finishing here in Long Beach. So I just wanted to make a note of that. We've been really grateful for this series. I'm excited to introduce back to the stage the president of Shell Energy, Glenn Wright, for our View from the Top slot. Welcome, Glenn.
Thank you. Happy
Welcome back. Thank you. I get to the hotel yesterday. I check into my room. I look out the window, and I have a vast view of the port of Long Beach, apropos for our conversation today. So let's just get right into it. So the port ecosystem facing a variety of complex challenges right now when it comes to decarbonization. Now, paint a 30,000-foot view picture for us and take us through some of those challenges to start.
Sure. I think first, maybe a little context with regard to seaports. Seaports are hubs of transportation and commerce. They are absolutely vital to the U.S. economy. They are gateways for passengers and for goods that move about our country, into, out of, around, and through. It is absolutely fundamental that we have them because they help our economy thrive. Now, having said that, with all those positives, at the same time, they are hubs for the convergence of engines. They concentrate in seaports. Those engines might be maritime engines in the form of ships or tugs or towing vessels. They might come from road transport, drayage trucks, vans, cars, or they might come from rail, locomotion. Beyond that, there's machinery throughout a seaport that moves cargo in and around the seaport. So you have a concentration of engines, and those engines produce emissions. They produce pollutants. So on the one hand, you have a real vital service, a good, and on the other hand, there's a need to mitigate the challenges that the emissions cause potentially to human health or climate. Seaports have done a phenomenal job at this point of trying to address the needs of their constituents, whether those are customers, tenants, or the communities that surround the seaports. They are being very responsive. They have very active decarbonization goals and objectives, and they're driving hard to meet those objectives. So to the challenges. When we think about decarbonization, we often think about electrification. Why electrification? Because of all of the energy sources, it is far and away the easiest to decarbonize. We have technologies that do that, whether it's solar, whether it's wind, and those are cost effective. So we think electrification. Having said that, electrification in a seaport is not trivial. Is not easy. Electrification requires, number one, that you have the financing. These projects, most projects in a seaport, they tend to be like snowflakes. Each is unique. And therefore, it's not like a standardized process when it comes to delivering outcomes for the seaport. Beyond that, it's logistically challenging. Seaports are busy places. There's a lot going on. And so you have to manage those logistics effectively. And then you have to have the right sort of labor, the right sort of skill set to deliver outcomes for those seaports. So when you think about it, there's this aging infrastructure that requires modernization, and to apply outcomes requires good financing, good logistics, and good wage, good skilled labor that can affect the good outcomes for these projects.
Let's talk a little bit more about the needs, though. I think you just touched on that. So as it relates to, what would you say is some of the needs in order to pursue some of these decarbonization activities for ports?
Well, again, one of the biggest challenges is financing. So provide the right resources, absolutely imperative. And there's a role to be played by government here. There are a number of administrative agencies that have programs that essentially fund opportunities to decarbonize, to introduce low and zero emission projects. For instance, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Energy, the EPA, all of them have programs. One that comes to mind, the Department of Transportation has the Ports Infrastructure Development Program. Earlier this year, they had $450 million that they made available competitively for projects that improve reliability, that improve efficiency, that improve safety when it comes to moving goods around a port. And of course, there's nothing that says you can't use that in combination to deliver a climate-friendly outcome. In addition, if you think about the Environmental Protection Agency, they have the Clean Ports Program. This program was made available by the Inflation Reduction Act, and $3 billion are available in this program to help fund and finance decarbonization outcomes. In particular, they focus on air quality, they focus on climate, they also talk about infrastructure like shore power, as well as the movement of trucks, of vehicles throughout the port. So all of these government funding offers the opportunity to help address, and that is a key challenge.
Mm-hmm. So, public-private partnerships as well. I think you touched on this a little bit. Can you take us through that some more? Are there any examples that you would want to share or point out?
Yeah, so I talked a bit about the public side of this, so let's talk about the private side of this. Why would a company like Shell be interested in placement in a seaport? Well, first of all, our objective is we power progress together by providing more and cleaner energy solutions, all right? And so much like seaports, we offer a service, a good, energy, because the world needs more energy. And simultaneously, we have to work in a way that ensures the Earth is fit for life. We want to make our contribution to that. We have net zero emissions goals by 2050 or sooner, and that encompasses Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions. Now, Scope 3 emissions are those emissions specifically that our customers emit when they use our products and services. So if we are to achieve our objectives, they must achieve their objectives. And our aim is to help them do exactly that, to help them achieve their objectives. And so we do that by making investment, direct investment. So you have the public and you have the private investment. We look at opportunities that are economically viable, socially acceptable, and environmentally sustainable. Now it's clear that the last two, social acceptability and environmental sustainability, are the objects, the purpose of these investments. They help to, again, improve health, and they help to address climate. By bringing public funding with private funding, we also make projects that are like snowflakes, economically viable, and that's absolutely key. Profitable decarbonization is the way we aim to go, and that's why we have interest in this space.
Now, ports are critical centers for electrification demand. I think you touched on this briefly. I'd like to go into that a little bit more. What are some insights into conversations you're having with both ports and port customers as it relates to solutions there?
Absolutely. So ports are areas where one needs to apply a multifaceted approach. We've talked a bit about decarbonization, and we've talked in particular about the electrification where we employ solar and wind energy, but that's only one facet. There is no silver bullet. It's imperative that we look at a number of different approaches to decarbonization in ports. So, for instance, modular vessel design helps in decarbonization. Imagine that you have a vessel that can pull out a battery and place in another fuel alternative. It's almost like Legos. That's not a fair comparison, but just imagine it's like that, right?
I get it. I have a 5-year-old. I get the analogy.
So modular vessel design is really important. Another approach that one thinks about is renewable fuels. And now I'm talking about molecules that are derived from renewable sources that actually fuel the engines and therefore are more carbon friendly. Or you can think in the context of potentially, well, there are lots of different approaches that might be applied. So those are some of the ideas. One of the things that comes to mind for me is, as an example, is we have collaborated with Kirby Corporation on the Green Diamond. Now, what is that? That is the nation's first hybrid electric inland towing vessel. That's an innovative combination of diesel and battery energy, right? This vessel, by the way, uses 60% less fuel than its counterparts. And we, Shell Energy, we provide the energy from shore and combine it with Green E certified renewable energy certificates, which effectively makes the energy provided to this vessel 100% renewable. The electric energy provided 100% renewable. That's a great example of how innovation comes together. Another example that comes to mind is in the Port of Galveston. We are working with port authorities to introduce onshore infrastructure, onshore power infrastructure. Some people call it cold ironing. Some might regard it as maritime alternative power. But basically, when ships are docked or at berth, they plug in. And when they plug in, they're using energy that we can then provide from renewable resources. And the consequence of that is that there is perhaps 30% less emissions. Also, there's up to 95% less pollutants that may go into that clearly impact environment and clearly impact communities. So these are other areas. And it also helps with regard to even noise pollution. There's substantially less noise when you're supplying electricity than when you're running the engines when ships are at berth. And so these are approaches that we think about in terms of just helping to advance the agenda of renewable energy imports.
We're about to get the hook, but at Axios we talk in axioms a lot, one of which is why it matters. So to finish out, really just to dive in here, so why is Shell interested in port decarbonization?
We are interested in decarbonization, port decarbonization specifically, is because this is where our customers are. It requires innovation, partnership, ingenuity, and infrastructure. Shell has been providing energy for more than 100 years. This is where we live. We know how to deliver complex projects. This is our expertise. We partner well, and we are integrators. We bring together the regulatory compliance, we navigate the financing, we work with our customers and partners to deliver positive outcomes for climate. And this is a region we're very focused on this space.
We're going to leave it there. I want to thank you again for being here in Long Beach. Really appreciate the conversation. And we'll thank you again for the partnership. Big thanks to Shell. Round of applause for Shell.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Glenn.
Welcoming back to the stage, it's me again, Naila Boodoo. Again, so we were just hearing Glenn talking about innovation and partnership. Well, a lot of times you can't do that without money. So I want to introduce our next guest, Lauren Faber O'Connor, who's currently operating partner at Lower Carbon Capital, former chief sustainability officer for the city of LA. Lauren, welcome. Lauren. I'm on the CSO beat today, it seems. But you told me, you were joking before when we were talking before this conversation that in your past job as LA CSO, you were like, how did I not know that these people exist? Meaning your job now. So I thought we could start with that. What you want, particularly government folks who may be here today, to know about Lower Carbon Capital.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think it's really exciting to know that a firm like Lower Carbon Capital exists. It's literally one of the largest early stage investors in climate technologies out there, and we're here in Los Angeles. We're investing upwards of $2 billion in climate solution technologies. The thesis, I'll just say really quick, is that There are a lot of us out there, a few million people out there who are willing to sacrifice a little bit, be a little bit, pay a little more, maybe face some discomfort, be a guinea pig when it comes to kind of taking responsibility to save the future of humanity. But the rest of society probably doesn't feel that way. And so we need to make things cheaper, better, faster, more affordable, more high quality, tastier in order to truly save the planet. And that's sort of the thesis behind lower carbon. And so it's just important to know that we're investing across all aspects of decarbonization in renewable energy and clean energy solutions, in critical minerals to power the batteries that we're building now, food and ag, maritime and goods movement, and in a number of areas like industrial materials, steel, cement, asphalt. It runs the gamut with us, and we're here in LA.
I think a lot of times the things that get headlines are sort of the sexy things like lab-grown meat or something like. But for when you think about, like at Axios, we'd like to talk about sort of the state of play for the industry. Like, what's most exciting to you? With the things what areas are you most excited about investing in and the potential for decarbonization?
We can go an entire tangent on lab-grown meat because there's a really important role to play in alternative proteins if we're really trying to sustainably feed the planet, perhaps for another day.
Another Axios event.
Another Axios event. But truly, I would say some of the most exciting areas are, of course, in the clean energy that is going to underpin the decarbonization of the economy, really looking at the interplay between clean baseload and how we utilize all of the renewable energy, fully utilize all of the renewable energy that we are building such that we don't need to curtail energy at different times of the day, how we use that extra very low cost energy to do all other kinds of things like power the rise of energy consumption from data centers and AI, a growth area that we can talk about, as well as an area that I think we are just starting to see. We used to call these hard to decarbonize sectors, the industrial sector of the economy. They are not hard to decarbonize. We've just sort of put them aside while we've focused on the transportation sector and the energy sector. But I will tell you that the work to decarbonize heavy industry is just skyrocketing and improving, and one of the areas I'm most excited about as we continue forward.
So I want to get to AI and I want to get to heavy industry, but first I want to go back to that clean baseload and the grid. We were talking to Rita earlier about the Clean Power Alliance. What to your mind are the biggest challenges to the grid here when it comes specifically to renewables?
What are some of the challenges here? Well, when I was a CSO of the city, so for some orientation, the city of Los Angeles, home to 4 million residents, about 1 million individual customers, energy utility customers, is serviced by the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, the largest municipal utility for water and power in the country. And LADWP also runs its own grid. So we are not part of the California grid. So when we were working toward, in my role, when we were charting out the path for DWP's decarbonization, we literally mean 24/7, this is what is powering the movement of electrons on the grid. So we were able to, through a really incredible partnership with the National Renewable Energy Lab, develop out what was called LA100, to truly chart the course to 100% renewable energy by 2035. That is what the city of Los Angeles is embarking upon, and I will say it has set a template for the rest of the country. In fact, DOE created an entire area of work.
Even if people don't own their grid, for how they can do this.
Absolutely, anywhere. It started actually, they took LA100 and went to Puerto Rico to kind of address some of the issues with the grid and the disasters that were happening there. But they're taking it to every community in the country and beyond because they can see whatever aspects however you interact with the grid, they have now developed a template through working with LA on how to chart your course to 100% renewable.
How much of that is because of partnerships, and what of those partnerships around renewables are most exciting to you all at lower carbon?
There's partnerships both with technology and with communities. And so I think a really important aspect in learnings that we had that has sort of been a hallmark of the city, but is also now truly integrated at DOE, is working with a large stakeholder advisory group. And that stakeholder advisory group was made up of large customers across the service territory, of community organizations, environmental organizations, clean tech supporters, to ratepayer advocate, everyone who's really going to be impacted and involved in the transition. So I'd say there's the community component. And then there is really scouring what kinds of technologies can service our solutions. And I would say when we released the report in, I believe it was 2021 or 2022, 2021, there was some areas left kind of unknown. And the me of today thinks, gosh, if I had only known some of the technologies that I work with today at Lower Carbon, if I knew they existed, what this would have looked like. And I'll tell you two things. One, the companies that we work with now probably didn't exist when we were developing this report between 2016 and 2020. So that's thing one. And thing two, we just have to appreciate how quickly the landscape is evolving, and that we have to remain really flexible and be willing to react to these incredible opportunities that are growing in front of us.
So we're here in Long Beach, so we've been talking about the port a lot, and I would be remiss, especially considering your past work with the port, if we didn't talk about that. Can we start with just your thoughts on hydrogen investment?
Sure. I mean, I was very involved in the work around the hydrogen hub that Los Angeles participated in for the state of California, and I will tell you that, look, there is certainly, I imagine, a place for green hydrogen in our economy. There were many problems that we were trying to solve across clean baseload energy production, across industrial decarbonization like our local refineries not far from here, and of course the port. And within the port itself, are we talking about heavy duty trucks? Are we talking about maritime? What are we talking about here? And what I'm so excited about now is I look at some of the companies in our portfolio at Lower Carbon Capital where, for example, take a company like Antora. They are, when you think about the role that green hydrogen is trying to play, and what we were seeing we were lacking and needed in LA was long-term energy storage. Essentially, that's what hydrogen provides, is an opportunity for energy storage. A company like Antora is doing thermal batteries. They're essentially taking the cheapest renewable energy off the grid and storing it in carbon blocks, graphite blocks, for 10 to hundreds of hours at a time, and then releasing that energy as heat that can, at high temperatures that to date have only been available through natural gas combustion, you're now basically redispatching that energy as heat or power. This is an exciting, it's modular, it's cheap, and it's incredibly flexible. Those are the types of solutions that we know can beat a lot of the other technologies to the market. When it comes to the port, okay, if we think about maritime, and that's an exciting area for hydrogen to potentially fulfill. There are many ships already in the water today that are bearing a huge responsibility. We're not just building the new ships, but we have to address the ships that are on the water today. So you take a company like Seabound that is literally capturing carbon at the stack, at the tailpipe, if you will, of a ship. And that is taking a ship of today, a highly polluting, highly carbon intensive ship into zero carbon today. These are really exciting complements to the build out of a potential hydrogen economy.
To that point, how do you think the oil refineries that are here could be powered cleaner?
Well, I mean, already Antora is powering ethanol refineries. So there's no doubt that they can power refineries across the country. They're partnering with renewable energy providers, particularly in wind, where a lot of wind projects have had trouble penciling out of late. And this completely changes the economics of renewable installations while also decarbonizing industry. And that helps the overall grid transition at the same time, because we know we have to do a lot of build out of renewables projects, but they're not going to be running all the time. And we have to build all the complementary technologies in order to make sure that we're fully utilizing the benefits of those projects.
So you're going to be in New York with me next week. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Rita, but about climate finance. What do you want people in the climate finance space particularly to be talking about next week?
So bee in my bonnet on climate finance is that we are on the precipice of an incredible revolution that has never been seen before on clean technology. This is not the clean energy of 1.0 that I think there's a little bit of hesitation around because we saw some bumps there. This is in every sector of the economy, and we have the ability to build at scale quite rapidly. One of the things that I want to make sure people know is that we have to get over, and there's a role for all different types of finance across the capital stack to play in getting over these sort of first-of-a-kind projects. Maybe the first-of-a-kind commercial scale project where we're actually producing cement being 8% of emissions across the world, that we're producing the cement zero carbon because we're using a few different chemical inputs, and no kiln. Couldn't have imagined that you could make cement at room temperature that is provided by, the energy provided by the grid. Well, so we need to build those out. And just because they look a little different, that means that conventional capital cannot sit on the sidelines to build them and wait for 2, 3 of them to exist before they come in 5, 10 years' time. Who has time for that when it comes to climate and everybody's goals? And we know the state of the science. So we don't have time for that. So we need to build a proper mix of capital coming in. That's government, that's conventional banks and asset managers, that's venture, where we are, and a lot of other opportunities to come together to bring down risk and bring these projects online more quickly.
One last quick question for you as we're talking about all of this. You've been talking about the private sector, innovation, corporations. Do you worry that all of these things that have been set in motion, if there were to be a second Trump administration, that would affect that?
So if you look at where the top 10 states that are experiencing the most investment from the IRA, you're going to see very red and purple states like Georgia, South Carolina, Michigan, Arizona, and so on. All 10 states, top 10 states. And so I do believe that there's going to be a moment where those states and those congressional delegations who are seeing hundreds of millions of dollars poured into onshoring a secure supply chain to power our economy are not going to say no thank you.
Okay, well, we are out of time, but I want to thank you, Lauren Faber O'Connor, Lower Carbon Capital. We've got one final interview if everyone will stick around. Please welcome to the stage Axios San Diego reporter Andrew Keats.
Hello. I'm Andrew Keats with Axios San Diego. If anybody ever finds themselves in San Diego for work or anything and you want to subscribe to our newsletter, that's at axios.com/local/San Diego. But without further ado, I want to introduce our final guest this evening. That's Long Beach Mayor Rex Richardson. How you doing?
Good. How are you? Welcome
Thanks
to
for having
Long
us in
Beach.
your beautiful city.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Well, so we've talked a lot today about some of these really ambitious and interesting policies and requirements, mandates from the state of California. Mm-hmm. And I've covered municipalities all over Southern California, and those requirements are difficult for all of them. But I don't know that any of them really sit in the position that your city does.
That's right. That's right.
Can you let's start off just by describing for us where in this transition that is, coming from the state in some ways, but it's also coming from the whole globe.
Right.
What types of pressure does that put on the city of Long Beach?
Well, to know a little bit about the city of Long Beach, we're a big city. By population, we're around the same size as Atlanta. We're larger than St. Louis, Miami, New Orleans. But we're in a massive region with 6 counties, 191 cities, 19 million people, right? Mm-hmm. And we are, a little bit of our history, 100 years ago, we were the fastest growing city in America because of an oil boom. We were a city, if anyone ever seen There Will Be Blood with Daniel Day-Lewis, is one of my favorites, right? a geyser would pop up of oil and the whole town would grow. Well, that was Long Beach 100 years ago. And that's why this year we celebrate 100 years since our airport and our first bank and our first hotel, because we were growing. Well, here we are 100 years later, and you see the opposite happening. We're a city that recognizes and acknowledges that oil is a part of our past, but it's not a part of our future. And for the last century, we've balanced our budget. We've hired police officers, firefighters, built out our coastline based on oil proceeds, and it's no longer a sustainable way for us to fund our services and our infrastructure moving forward. And so we find ourselves at an inflection point where we need to grow a more sustainable future, a more sustainable economy that's not dependent on fossil fuels. So as much as the state action is driving this transition, it's local action as well that's driving this transition by investing in more climate-friendly and sustainable revenue sources for our city. And so where we are today, we were one of the first cities in California with an adopted climate action plan. Our transition to sort of end our production of oil was actually 10 years ahead of what the state originally proposed. And now we're in a place where we see that some of the services that we provide in our coastline, like lifeguards and all of those services, we're on course to transition some of those services off of oil revenue by 2030, and some services like public safety by 2029. And so this is a big transition for us. We also, many of our resources that we have, our port and all of those things, really been driven by the need to have a strong economy. And the concept of the environment and the climate has always been an afterthought. Well, today that's changed. We no longer believe that environmental progress and economic progress have to be mutually exclusive. In fact, that's the pathway forward. That transition in our port, the transition in our climate is why we're one of the cleanest ports in the United States now, why we receive more federal funding than any port in the United States from the Biden-Harris administration, more funding from the Newsom administration than any port in California. It's because of our fidelity to the environment. And so we'll talk more about some of those projects as we get into the conversation.
Yeah, I want to get into some of those projects, but entertain me for a little bit. It's not that hard to imagine a person in your position whose budget has as much riding on fossil fuel to, instead of saying, here are the opportunities for us to transition, here are the different ways that we can be innovative, to instead look for pressure points where they could undermine what the state is trying to do. Why not?
Look, we agree that we need to move away from fossil fuels. The question is how? Everyone has an opinion. No one has a plan, is what we find. I came into office 18 months ago, and you've got pressure from the state and pressure from others to simply turn off the faucet. Okay, let's turn off the faucet. Our plan was originally 10 years ahead of the state's requirement to turn off the faucet. But what's the plan for those jobs? What is the plan for how we fund those services? I'll give you an example. We had historic rainfall last season, and there was an incident where we had 19 sailors who went out to test out their sailing skills in this storm, and the mast broke and they ended up stranded on the breakwater, and we had our swift water rescue team lifeguards swimming and saving these guys, right? And we have more extreme weather events now than ever before due to the effects of climate change, but every one of those lifeguards is funded fully from oil. So while the oil revenue is going away, the demand for coastal protection and coastal services is increasing. So it's simply a math problem. Bill Clinton would say arithmetic, right? How do you solve that problem? So here's what we're doing. We're investing in fast-growing industries that generate revenue, that create job opportunities, and we're in a place, someone earlier said, we're really built out in these areas, so we have to be very selective about the companies that we bring to our city. We're not looking for more warehouses with $15, $20 an hour jobs. If we have space, we want advanced technology, advanced manufacturing. We want research and development. We want jobs where $45 an hour welding, building a satellite or a rocket in Long Beach can put someone from Long Beach City College into a job to support their future. That is the transition we're in the middle of. So that strategy is called Grow Long Beach. We're one of the fastest growing aerospace clusters in the United States. We are transitioning our port to decarbonization and electrification, which makes a whole lot of sense for us. When you take someone off of diesel and they plug in, number one, it cleans up the environment for communities in West Long Beach. But number two, we charge a tax on that electricity, and that becomes a clean revenue source to support those services. So those are a couple of the opportunities. The last one is pretty exciting. There's 5, but the last one I'll mention is really arts, culture, and tourism. So Long Beach is on hand to be a major waterfront venue for LA 28. We are the largest venue city outside the city of Los Angeles. This will be our third time hosting the Olympics, and we'll be hosting more events than we had in 1932 and 1984 combined. And so this is an opportunity for Long Beach to really come out of the shadow a bit and really double down on tourism. When people come into our city to stay at a hotel and eat at a restaurant, one of our incredible restaurants that we have in Long Beach, which I hope you go check some out while you're here, that creates ripple effects in terms of revenue in our city. And those dollars help provide the revenue we need to provide quality services. And so when we host the Olympics, we're doing things like making sure it's inclusive. We're the first city to pass an Olympics wage for hospitality workers. Right now it's at $23.50. It goes to $29.50 by the time the Olympics comes, so that the Olympics are inclusive of our local workforce.
So you mentioned replacing revenues through the hospitality industry, but a city audit this year said that you're looking at about a $300 million hole over the next 10 years based on the decommissioning of the wells. To what extent do you expect and are delivering a message to the state that they have a responsibility to help make you whole in that?
Well, we had this conversation with the governor, with the state, more than a year, a little more than a year ago. And we said, we're on board with this transition, and here are the things we need. And the governor came back and the legislature came back and said, bring us a plan. And so we went back and we presented 6 concepts that are really revenue neutral to the state that allow us to get through this transition, think about the workforce, think about those revenues. And so we presented that most recently. And one of them included a bill that allowed that the decommission of wells and the transition of those wells is going to cost about $1.2 billion. And right now the state's setting aside about $2 million a month, $24 million a year. So it'll take us 30, 40 years just to get the funding to do transition that's being required in 5, right? And so we asked them to increase that amount. And we're proud that the governor last week signed the bill to increase the monthly set aside. We're grateful to our Senator, Lena Gonzalez, who picked up this bill and ran with it. There's more work that needs to be done, but I think the message is we're not afraid of this transition, but we have to be real about, there's a fly here. We have to be real about what the impacts are. These are real folks with real jobs. Our lifeguards, we're a coastal city. We have to provide lifeguards. And we may not fund it with oil anymore, but that means it puts more pressure on the general fund, which means you're going to have fewer park programs and libraries and after-school programs, right? And police officers and firefighters. So we have to grow our revenue in a way that is more sustainable. This November, for example, we conducted an audit and saw that utility users tax that we have in our city, we apply it to every company. Even the city's power plants pay this tax. But there were 2 power plants in the city that don't, based on some handshake agreement, who knows when. We can't afford that level of corporate welfare anymore. And so we have a measure on the ballot to close that loophole. That generates $15 million a year, right? Now, when you add it all up, $15 a year over 10 years, $150 million. How much did you say that the whole was?
$300 million.
So there are things that we can do today to get ahead of it, right? Like, we have to be thinking about the future. If we do this right, we can take our general fund revenue off of fossil fuels, make our city more sustainable, and hand it to future generations in a stronger position than it was when we received it, and do the first thing for the first time, have our city services independent of oil revenue for about a century, first time in a century.
So something that's going to have a role in that is these 2 major projects at the port, Arches, Pier Wind. I know people are very excited about those. Tell us a little bit about those and what sort of opportunities is that?
So we're taking decarbonization and seeing it as the opportunity that it is. We have a number of proposals and projects in Long Beach that are going to create significant economic benefit to our region. One is called Pier Wind. California has a mandate, has a required, or a goal rather, to generate a certain amount of its power through wind. And so we have a deep water port, a major port. We have a proposal to manufacture and assemble these offshore turbines here and deploy them off the West Coast. The projections say that this can create 8,000 to 10,000 union jobs. That's to the same scale as when Long Beach was home to the Naval Shipyard. Those are big ideas. There's a bond on the ballot this year that invests $400 million to make that a reality that the legislature put forward. And so we stand to benefit from that standpoint. And then there's hydrogen. When you think about Long Beach as the largest, one of the, number 2, and the cleanest port in the United States, we have a role on the global stage to make sure that the supply chain is decarbonized and clean. And so, when I'm in Copenhagen or in Geneva talking with the owners of the shipping lines, they're asking the question, how do we take these container vessels and move them to alternative fuels? Well, hydrogen, ammonia, other things, alternative to diesel, have to be a part of that conversation. And so we have to talk about building the infrastructure here. So Arches builds an entire new ecosystem, and we were proud to receive $1.3 billion from the Biden-Harris administration to build a new hydrogen hub ecosystem, everything from manufacturing, distribution, all of this ecosystem to create an alternative for trucks and for the entire ecosystem of goods movement that we need. We need an alternative while we transition to electrification.
Yeah. And so what is the city's role when you're doing that? The ports, it's its own entity. What is your job here?
Well, all of this pressure on the climate, this creates innovation, right? Long Beach is a hub for innovation. We're a big city. We have an oversized port. What the decisions we make in Long Beach impact the region, where 1 in 5 jobs across our region are related to the Port of Long Beach, our nation, and the world. And so it forces us to really think creatively about how we plan to address decarbonization in our ports, with trucks, with opportunities like Pier Wind, in the ways that we finance the operations of our city, and it serves as an example for what is possible. I don't believe that we should be afraid of this transition. I think we have to get ahead of it. We have to fully embrace it because there's opportunities for your city, and there are economic opportunities as well in this transition. So again, I'll go back to the point that it's not only about economic progress, it's also about environmental progress. They're not mutually exclusive. They are the pathway forward.
So the city of Long Beach has a climate action plan, puts about 40% of 1990 emissions by 2030. And many of those cuts will come through state actions or utility actions. They won't necessarily fall on city, municipal decision making. But some of them will.
Right.
And many cities are, having a hard time figuring out exactly what that looks like.
Right.
In terms of changing over the built environment with gas appliances, gas hookups to electrical hookups.
Right.
It's a big change. How do you, at the city level, require new builds, new development to look the way you imagine on the other end of this transition?
Listen, I came into office, my youngest daughter was in kindergarten, right? And so I knew we had, if I'm able to serve 3 terms, if the good people elect me to 3 terms, she'll be graduating high school by the time I'm finished, right? So that, over that course of that 12 years, that's the window of the Climate Action Adaptation Plan, right? That plan shows that there's a whole host of things we need to get done. Now, government can't control everything, but there are a lot of things that are under our control, like zoning, land use, planning for the future. We have a responsibility to make sure that we have these plans, you plan the work, you work the plan, which is what we're doing by making sure that we have climate-friendly building codes in our city's plans, that we're building with a lens on climate, and that we're transitioning over the course of that 10, 12 years, transitioning our city's emissions, our city's energy sources to become cleaner. So we're taking those steps now. For the first time, all of our energy that we use in our city we transition 100% renewable for the first time. We are transitioning our fleet, our entire fleet in our city. We have our own transit. We have our own airport. Our airport is a hub for climate tech innovation, where we're looking at jets and planes that are even more energy efficient and being flown and being developed to be hybrid or even ready for hydrogen. And so we take it very seriously as an independent city with our own port, own airport, own utilities department. We take it very personally to really lead this decarbonization transition.
Well, Mayor Richardson, we are out of time, but
got in a lot
there. Yeah, we got in a lot. Thanks again for being here. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for being here, and anybody else who joined us online, thank you as well. And just be sure to subscribe to any of our newsletters at Axios.com, and thank you all very much.